Hey, welcome to the Lowdown with Tony Lowe. I don't even know what number this is, but we're back. Eric Oblander is back.
I'm at your first two-time guest.
You're the first two-timer.
Booyah.
Yeah.
You're a smart man. You're a smart man, Tony. OG Tony Lowe. You know what that's from?
Yeah, for sure.
You know what that's from?
OG Tony Lowe?
Yeah.
You tell me.
You ever listen to The Chronic?
You mean Dr. Dre?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the $20 sack pyramid, the little skit?
It's been a long time. I don't know.
Well, there's a skit, and she's like, my name is OG Henny Lowe, so I've called you OG Tony Lowe.
Oh, yeah. That record, despite being a classic, kind of falls out of my brain.
That's a shame. That's your problem.
It's just a stylistic thing. I was more of a Public Enemy guy or a Wu-Tang.
Tribe Called Quest. Everyone can't like both, I know.
No, you can. You can appreciate both, but as far as listening.
I get you.
So here's what's up, dude. I wanted to do this with you because I am so freaked out. I've had so many serious conversations, and for school, I'm doing all this serious reading, and all my books are terrifying because I'm studying, American cultural history, and it's just awful to see what's added up to where we are and how we repeat the past. So we wanted to do something fun. And what's more fun than rock and roll films? So we're going to talk concert movies. Now, some rules. We're going to do a little show and tell, talk and tell, story tell, whatever tell. We'll go back and forth. I asked you, Eric, to pick 5 movies. Oh, if you're watching this, click like and subscribe, please.
Twice, because that's my second time.
Yeah, twice, because Eric's the first two-time and double guest.
Two-timer.
So we're going to go back and forth, and I asked Eric for 5 films. Now, this doesn't mean these are the best of all time. They're not ranked. They're just 5 of the first really exciting to talk about concert films that we thought of. So we're going to do that. And if we have to come back and do another one, we will. Because there's a lot of great concert films, I realized.
Yes. And this job. And when you invited me to do this, I was like, yeah, I'll write these down. And then I realized how difficult it was.
It is.
Because much like you, I love so many kinds of music. And I love performances in general. I mean, that's why I do my jobs that I do. And as I started to write them down, I was like, 5. I say, here's 20. And that was still not really enough. And then I get it down to 5. I just had to pretend like, all right, this is better. That's good. I picked it.
It's impossible.
And I actually, as I told you before we started, I actually took some notes.
Yeah.
Because there was so many thoughts I had on so many of these movies. And so many of the ones you told me you were going to pick that I kind of didn't, and I didn't want to be like, oh, I wish I would have said that after. So if you see me looking over here, it's because I copied and pasted a Word document with a lot of Wikipedia stuff.
Yeah.
So, but also just stuff I don't want to forget to talk about.
That's fine. I never look people in the eye. I'm always looking around. Or I find that they say you're supposed to look at the camera instead of look at the person. And I don't really give a shit.
Whenever I film interviews for my TV shows, I never have, unless it's something wacky, I never have them look directly in the camera. I'm always much more comfortable watching an interview that's like this. But I think for this, I'm talking to you. I'm looking at your face. So,
Yeah. Well,
so like you said, people want you to look into the camera, but I mean, you're this far away from the camera. So.
Well, in journalism, they teach you that if you want to film an official, credible person, you have them look straight in the camera. And if you're trying to make them just kind of an observer on the street kind of vibe, you shoot them from an angle.
On my camera that I shoot with, my Panasonic, there's a little Panasonic logo right above the lens on the body. And that's why I always tell people to look, and that's where I look.
Yeah.
Works every time.
Unpaid
sponsorship.
So let's talk about some movies, shall we?
Do it, dude.
Well, why don't you go with the first one? What do you want to talk about first? And because I prepared nothing aside from grabbing off my shelves a few of the ones we mentioned. I tried to get photos from the internet, but the quality is so bad. We're not showing any clips because YouTube will just yank that stuff.
Yeah, it won't be worth it. They'll just pull it. And I mean, people can go find this stuff. Most of these are streaming. Most of the ones, at least I'm going to pick, are you can find them online. A lot of them are on YouTube, you know.
And if we're mentioning it, you know it's worth a watch.
That's right. Take advice from these two pros, these two old pro dogs.
I like.
I'm not going to go.
But I like concert movies better than albums. I just really do.
I think it depends, and we'll talk about it as we go through our list because I found an underlying theme of most of the ones I picked.
Okay.
And I'll tell you about that when we get to it.
All right, let's do this. Go ahead.
All right. So again, these are my 5. There are some of these bands have, or these performers have other movies even, like live performances, but I just picked one and I'll explain why.
Okay.
All right. So the first one that I picked off the gate was Ladies and Gentlemen, the Rolling Stones.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me more.
Okay. So I know Gimme Shelter is the go-to everyone talks about forever. And it's like the thing, it's like cultural, like, you know, like Landslide and the biker and the murder and all that stuff. But it's kind of a bummer, that movie. Like you don't really get, and I just want to rock. And the Ladies and Gentlemen, the Rolling Stones is like the Stones at the height of their absolute blinding power. Like,
okay, now when is that? What's the lineup?
So this is the Mick Taylor era.
Okay.
So like when they were like right when they just had got done doing Exile, and they were on tour for Exile on Main Street. So you know,
get your yayas out.
No, that was way earlier.
Okay, keep going then. Okay.
So the set list, like I copied and pasted. This was the first movie that I copied and pasted because this is so quintessential Rolling Stones right here. Let me read this passage.
Let's hear it.
You're gonna love this so much. Okay, well, first of all, let me caveat by saying that this movie is them just absolutely fully on shredding. This is like the best I've ever seen Keith Richards ever do anything. He's not at all fucked up. He's not messing around. He's stomping his feet in his big old boots.
Yeah.
Him and Mick are like back to back in the microphones. That version of Happy on this, which I posted on Facebook the other day, is like the greatest version of anything ever. It's 3 minutes of them just full on like flame throwing. You know, it's like it's so good. And you can tell that every time you watch good Stones footage, you can tell that Mick and Keith especially kind of look at each other like, we're so rad. Like they know it and it's great. And you can see it in this. They're dressed super cool, but they're not, it's like Mick's got the glitter on his face, you know, they're getting a little out there and they're not like the little schoolboy dudes anymore. They're like a little dirtier and weirder, yeah. But like, they're still like got that rock and roll vibe, that hyper vibe. But listen to this paragraph. I'll read the first 2 sentences and you're gonna laugh.
Okay.
The film was sold by the Rolling Stones as a tax incentive based venture capital investment. 9 investments groups competed to acquire the film, and the winning group, named Dragonair Limited, a 1-film distribution company, was formed to floor-wall the film throughout the United States. I mean, is that not the most Rolling Stones? Like, even then, they were like this ridiculous machine, you know?
We're talking about the same crew that couldn't get into the U.S. because they wouldn't be able to get through the drug inspection, so they just had their blood completely removed and replaced with other blood.
I mean, that old story, that old chestnut. This was like around 74. This movie was shot. Let me read you the lineup of the set. It was Brown Sugar, Bitch, Gimme Shelter, Dead Flowers, Happy, Tumbling Dice, Love in Vain, Sweet Virginia, You Can't Always Get What You Want, All Down the Line, Midnight Rambler, Rip This Joint, Jumpin' Jack Flash, and Street Fighting Man.
All right, now I gotta watch it just for that set. My God.
And I mean, they are like full on, like they don't. It's so good, man. So the reason I picked this beyond the fact that it's so good is that there's no like other trappings with it. There's no like subplot of like the murder and stuff. It's just really fun to watch masters just slaying, you know?
And I have to say, a lot of people freak out about Mick Taylor, you know, and how great he is. And he is. I'm not I don't go crazy for Mick Taylor. It's not that he's not great. It's just that he doesn't hit my receptor as a guitar player of like, man, I love listening to Mick Taylor. That said, I love the Mick Taylor era Stones as an ensemble.
Yeah.
And it is, you are right, the very most brutal and perfect Keith Richards you'll ever hear.
Well, I'm a person who thinks the Faces were probably the greatest pound for pound rock band in their, like, pound for pound and hour for hour they existed ever, like, in my opinion.
For rock and roll.
Yeah, for rock and roll band, and when they got Ron Wood, they obviously were like, well, we need to acquire some of that heat. They want that. And Ronnie's great. Woody's fantastic. One of my favorite people ever. And two of the more underrated solo albums ever in history are those Ron Wood solo records. I got an album to do or whatever it's called, and forget the other one, which is actually my favorite one. But anyway,
how recent?
Right when they were, 70s.
Okay.
I got an album to do, and Now Look is the other one, and Now Look is great. Everything is great on them. They sound like weird Stones records without Mick singing anything. Like they're a little more raw and like not raw, but like lo-fi, But my point being that when he showed up, they became even more titanic, really, like more gigantic and iconic. But this era is like, but what's funny about it is when you listen to the records, it just sounds like a wild rage, like all the time, right? But even when you listen to this live performance, if you don't look at it, but what's funny is when you watch it, it's Mick and Keith just absolutely freaking out. And then Mick Taylor doesn't move, and he's shredding on guitar, but like Keith's jumping around, like 1 foot, like backing up, and Mick's like not even looking up. He's like standing there, stoic, perfectly still, just playing his solos and shredding. But you could definitely see like he was kind of like this weird little island on his own in the band, So
they blend so well, man. It's like a Hound Dog Taylor record where it's just two guitars and they're so intertwined. Of course, with the Stones, you've got the big lineup, the big rock and roll ensemble with piano, bass, drums, two guitars, harmonica, the Muddy Waters setup, which is, a lot of people don't realize that. That's the setup, man. That's the electric rock and roll blues setup. That's the Butterfield band. That's Muddy Waters band. That's everybody's band. But the Rolling Stones copied that, and they made it into that big 70s thing.
And they found all the right dudes, all the time.
Keith Richards solo records in the 80s are just with the expensive winos. That's Steve Jordan, Bernie Worrell is in there.
Waddy Wachtel. Those are phenomenal records. Yeah, and I still listen to those records a lot. The one problem I ever bump up against in those records is the production. Because the production, it's so 80s, and it's like, but like if you listen to, I think Shouldn't Take It So Hard is like one of the best songs probably ever written in my mind.
Oh my.
It's so good. I just love that song. Like I can listen, one of those songs I can play 50 times in a row. I just think it's great.
Well, those are some of the best Stones riffs that were never in Stones songs.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding,
yeah.
And then what makes those, I think the guitars sound amazing on those records.
Yeah, I guess it's not, I don't know. There's something about the overall space of the production. Like Steve Jordan's drums are great, but every record he's ever played on has that strange big room sound. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like, it's just a Steve Jordan thing. Might be because his cymbals are 9 feet in the air. I don't know. But so that's my pick for my first pick of stuff. Cause did you ever hear the apparent story when Mick Taylor left the Rolling Stones?
You better tell it.
They stopped at a truck stop on tour and he disappeared. And like, he just was gone from the tour bus or whatever. Then they ran into him like years later and they were like, why did you leave our band? And it was supposedly the story is he's like, I don't know. But he has no idea. He just walked off and was all jacked up. And
okay.
yeah, he's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know whether that's true, but it's super Rolling Stones if it is.
That is very Rolling Stones.
So that's my first one.
All right. Well, I'm going to show you my first one, which is kind of Keith Richards related. Now, this, for my money, is actually all total. And this is big talk, I realize. But when it comes to the entire long, like there are historically important concert films that I'm not even going to talk about, like Woodstock and everything.
We'll get to them.
They're important. But for an understanding of the long throw of rock and roll history, there is no greater film than this one, which also involves Keith Richards, Chuck Berry, Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll. Now, this movie is not just a great concert film. It is an entire concert, but also has the rest of a narrative, a documentary. And what this is Keith Richards throwing a 60th birthday party for his hero, Chuck Berry, and assembling all of the very greatest in, what was this year, like 1980?
By 82 or something.
Ish. I should be, no, 87 of all things. So 1987, and all of the great, we're talking, who's on here? Robert Cray, Eric Clapton, again, Steve Jordan, Julian Lennon, Linda Ronstadt, Etta James, Roy Orbison, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Bo Diddley, the Everly Brothers, Willie Dixon, everybody you can think of that would have any tie to either 80s rock, 50s rock, or all points in between, coming together to celebrate Chuck Berry. Now, what Keith Richards might not have realized completely is how insane Chuck Berry is. And
I think he knew. I think he totally knew, and you can tell that he's trying to get it together, but he didn't realize. Well, go ahead.
No, I know he knew how crazy he was because he'd already been knocked out one time by Chuck Berry with a fist. But I don't think he realized the extent to which the madness would, seep into every aspect of planning and executing this birthday party.
That's right.
So you get everything from, Chuck Berry fighting with them to on stage at this giant performance, trying to change the key of the song in the middle of the song, with this huge band of like 20 people on stage. And he's like, let's go to F. And they're like,
what? And the whole time in that movie, it's the only time you ever see in the history of time, Keith Richards look like a little kid. Like he just looks like, okay, all right, big bro. Like he's kind of scared of him. And he also just reveres Chuck, but he's also like kind of like, I can't. This dude is too much. You know what I mean? Like and that's Keith Richards saying that, dude.
When they're trying to practice. They show the practice.
That's the best part.
Yeah, them trying to do "Oh Carol."
It's amazing.
And Chuck Berry making Keith Richards play the intro over and over again. He's like, "You want to get it right? Let's get it right." And Keith Richards is like, just so bad.
So he's like, you realize we've played the song 5,000 times in front of like 1 million people, but okay.
And for those who don't know, Chuck Berry's famous for, he doesn't practice with a band. And Bruce Springsteen tells the story in the movie about how he was the backup band for Chuck Berry. And Chuck Berry at one time, and he thought he was doing this great thing where, oh man, we'll open for Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry didn't care who Bruce Springsteen was. There was nobody to him. He was like yelling at him. He just walks on stage and Bruce Springsteen says, what songs are we going to do? While they're on stage, Chuck Berry just pulled up in the car, walks on stage, and there's Bruce Springsteen. Everybody's like, there he is. What are we going to play, Chuck? And he's like, we're going to play some Chuck Berry songs, boys. 1, 2, 3, 4. and just madness. So
great.
Keith Richards is trying to be a band leader with this giant band. And he's like, okay, so we're going to need you to do the intro, and Chuck will need you. We don't want you to have to worry about playing rhythm and popping in on the leads. That'll be too much to worry about. And Chuck Berry says, well, it wasn't. In other words, I've been doing it all my life. I'm live in the studio on those records. You know, just missing the whole point that they were trying to include all these huge famous artists that wanted to pay tribute. He's like, I don't care. I'm just going to play some Chuck Berry songs in whatever key I feel like, and you all newcomers can come along. It's so fun.
So great.
Oh, God. Anyway, it's one of the greatest. And that concert, I mean, you get to see why Chuck Berry is Chuck Berry, because it's not that he's crazy. He really is a titan, above, head and shoulders above any mother that they put up there with.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's still like the ultimate, like, you know, that guy, you know. I think that was the first DVD I ever saw. Like the first time a DVD format came out the first thing I saw was that, I believe.
When I was in the band Junior Electric with my friend Jeff Luce, who we tragically lost last year, who died. Some of my best memories, he and I used to study rock and roll. I mean, from when we were kids, we studied guitar together. And I mean studied because we would go to these country rock seminars, and we would learn from a man named Bob Cox, who's an incredible fingerstyle, Chet Atkins style guitar player. And we would hang out with all these railroad working men that his dad knew from the railroad, and we would learn all the old styles. Or I mean, it weren't styles, it was like we just were immersed in it. We weren't trying to learn it. We wanted to be like, you know, Jay Mascis or somebody, but we were learning it through that window of country. But we were into old rock and roll, and we would listen to blues, we would listen to the Beatles, and we watched this movie together. I'm not kidding, probably 100 times. We memorized every note. We listened to Chuck Berry records. We tried to figure out how they got that drum sound and why the guitar sounded so good. And all my favorite memories with Jeff's guitar playing, he would either be playing one of my guitars, one of my vintage Fenders I used to collect, or he had a 335, just like Chuck Berry. And he would play kind of a little, he was into it, man. He did the Chuck Berry thing. And anyway, whatever. But I'm so deep into this movie. I stand by it, though. Greatest of all time.
Yeah, it's a good one, man. It's a good pick. The Great 28, man. I mean, you listen to that record and it's nonstop. And it will be in a million years, provided this globe is still floating around the sun, people will be like, you ever listen to this old record? I mean, it's going to be around. It sounds relevant now when you listen to it.
It's so good. And even in modern times, Brown-Eyed Handsome Man right now is more relevant.
That was the song in my head right when you said that.
Yeah, man. I mean, those songs, I would put that record, The Great 28, against any other band's whole collection.
Yeah.
And there might be albums you like better. There might be records that are as good, or discographies that are as good. But I don't care who you're talking about. There's nobody better than The Great 28. If you're just talking about straight rock and roll, it never got better than what he did.
What's really funny about it is English punk rockers figured out a great way to freak out Americans was just do Chuck Berry riffs and send them back our way. And so they're like, hey, here's some Chuck Berry riffs, like, and even doing covers of like Chuck Berry songs and other 50s songs. And everyone was like, oh, pearl clutching their pearls at this raw music. And it's like, dude, it literally was just on your jukebox in the 1950s. What are you even doing, you know?
Imagine what it sounded like when all you had ever heard was Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys.
So I used to talk to my dad about that. Because my dad was, you know, he was born and raised in Saginaw, and you know, when he grew up, it was like all like very soft stuff. And he used to listen to CKLW on, you know, to get the blues stuff. And he said when those records came out, he was real young, and he said it was like the world caught on fire. Like everyone was like, whoa, what? You know, like And then some people were like, and scared. Like, actually, can you imagine making a record that scared people now? Like anything that would actually frighten people into like
No,
hiding behind it. I mean,
not
it's,
like that.
that's power, man. And that's just innovation and whatever. So
Homework for the viewing audience, each and every one of the five of you. Some point.
well, four, because I'm on this episode.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's right. Four people. So if you crank up, go put on Maybelline, the song Maybelline. Get in whatever car you're in. It doesn't have to be a fast one. But go a little too fast in a place where you shouldn't. Be safe now, but be a little unsafe in your car. And crank it up as loud as you can. And if that drum sound, that like maraca infused, and that guitar, if you can't get your head to a space where that is an absolute train coming down on you, you got to recalibrate your brain, because the problem ain't Chuck. That shit is scary in a great way, and it makes you want to be an American in the ways that, not the fascist nationalist way, but the real fucking, like, I want to be an American, and I want this car to smoke when I climb out of it, and I want to peel tires and turn up guitars loud. And
This is the music we invented. Check it out. What do you think?
this is the sound. This is the sound of industrial America on the rise, and of Black America planting a flag on this continent. And if you don't hear that, and your pulse doesn't quicken, you don't know what the hell's going on.
I had this, I guess, well said, by the way. I had this experience once a couple years ago. My son goes to this old Catholic school. Like
Yeah.
the building is like 100 years old. And in the parking lot, they were having a car show, an old-timey car show. And this dude was blasting Chuck Berry, of course, because that's like the staple that dads do when you're at a car show. But so I went in, so the building was, I went in to use the restroom, I wanted to use the bathroom in the building, and it was real hot summer. And I go inside, and I'm the only one in the whole school as far as I can see. And this is like this real old gray lockers, shiny floor, far windows. And outside, Chuck Berry, Maybelline is blasting. And I go inside in the door, and it's just outside echoing. You can hear that song, like, and I'm there in this big building by myself, and I look out, and it was such like a weird, like, transportation, like mental, like I felt like I was like sliding back into the 50s, or I don't know what. It was just so, like, it was just this moment where I was like, wow, like this music is, it's evoking a lot, right here. So it was just a cool moment.
And for the music nerds, something that we're talking about here, that there's some overlap, is that part of what makes the difference between more of a traditional style of rock and roll and a rock music, and this is what was exploited brilliantly by the Stones and Keith Richards and all the bands that had that rootsy feel, is that the rhythms of the day were swing rhythms, blues rhythms, and the guitar, the innovators in rock and roll, as guitar became a more prominent instrument, played the rhythm pretty straight, chick 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 chick, while the drums ding duck ding duck ding duck ding is what gives it that feel of there's a friction to it that really did revolutionize the way people listened to and heard music. You had the swing was its own revolution, but then you put those straight notes back in, straight eighth notes against a swing, and you get the feel of those old rock and roll records that's really tense, that you can't create unless you're unless you're a real weirdo like me in a Pro Tools kind of quantized rhythmic setting.
Yeah, those Bo Diddley records, those first like 3 or 4 are the same kind of, that you feel like it's somebody, like it almost sounds like an alien landing or something. It's so outrageous. It's like yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff still. Listen to it now and it still makes it, still
Yeah.
makes my arms hair stand up.
it's a racist thing that a lot of people will say, oh man, it sounds like we're deep in the jungle. Like that's like a kind of a racist narrative. But at the same time, the reason people say that is that it is really a return to something deep and soulful and sacred in the American heart, and does take us back to our origins. And that is Africa. So there is kind of this deep human soul place that's rooted in the earth, in a place that maybe some of our more contemporary sounds aren't. Maybe those are more rooted in somebody's corporate bank account or something. But the real soulful deep stuff, you find a route that takes you back somewhere you never been.
For sure, man.
Well, okay, what's next?
Am I up next?
Yeah.
It's Prince, Sign of the Times.
Good.
Sorry,
You can
Sign O the Times.
Yeah, you have to teach me about Prince, because it's a sad admission that I've never really been able. I understand Prince. I have some annoyances about the way people talk about Prince, but I want to hear from you because I missed the boat on Prince. I don't get it.
The thing about this record or this movie is that and this is the thing that I've kind of discovered throughout all of my picks, is that the movies I pick seem to capture the band, at whatever band it is, at the height of their powers, kind of. Like, when you look back, that was like, that's about as good as it's going to get for them, you know.
So which band is this? Is this the New Power Generation?
Yeah, so this is the Prince, like the New Power Generation is 87.
Okay.
And so this record was, from what I read about it, which I didn't know, they originally, like, he'd put out Sign of the Times. I think he put out the album, or put out an album, and it was like kind of like not doing great. So they wanted to do a live concert movie to promote it. Yeah. So he recorded these shows in like Holland somewhere that they were going to film and then release. But then when they got the videos back, Prince was not happy with the sound or the audio or the video. He wasn't up to his standards. So they just went back to Paisley Park and redid the whole thing, which is so Prince to be like, I'm going to scrap this whole motherfucker and do the whole thing at my place. So come on. So they redid the whole concert, and then and in true, what only can be described as what Prince can get away with fashion, they did these little weird, very 80s late 80s kind of portending the 90s look vignettes, where there'll be like these weird staged things of like a girl in cutoff jeans, but like it's like purple lighting and like an obvious cardboard set. And
of course it's purple.
Yeah, right. But then like a blue bed and she's looking out a window, and then the camera pans to the window to the stage, and there's Prince. You know, it's like they set this whole thing up. It's so ridiculous. But it's like every song is great on it. And it ends with one of my more, like, I think one of the more underrated Prince songs, which is The Cross, which is this weird, slow, weird, like he's kind of like does that Bob Dylan thing where he's like, oh, I'm religious. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just kidding. And like, oh, yeah, maybe I am. No, I'm not. But The Cross is like all about like the power of whatever. And it's this slow, grindy, like kind of heavy jam, and it ends on that. He looks super awesome in it. The band is super great. Yeah. It's fun to watch. Like it's got that typical. What is it about Prince that you have questions about?
No, it's not. It's not that there's nothing wrong with Prince. I feel that he's very misunderstood. My appreciations of Prince are, I think that his amazing gifts, besides being the singer that he is and the aesthetic singularity that he is, which is enough. He's a really important influencer when it comes to arranging and when it comes to his approach to rhythm guitar. And what bothers me is I feel like those things never get discussed, and they're getting lost in the story of Prince's greatness, you know. But like his feel as a funk rhythm guitar player, and the way that, like, even if you just listen to the song Kiss, you know, if you listen to the outro or any part of that song, that brilliant way that he's muting and extraordinarily tight with the hi-hat and then able to fall back and back in strategically. And the way that he phrases his lead lines that slither through the end of that track, it's real genius as a guitar player, in the sense of, you know, someone from the olden times.
Yeah, I agree.
And what people talk about from his guitar playing standpoint, it's annoying. They'll share the most awful Prince footage, like that "While My Guitar Gently Weeps" thing everybody talks about, where he, look at him upstage the band. No, he's just doing some guitar shop noodling that he's capable at, but that's not special or great. He's not blowing everybody's minds. They're
Right.
just standing around normal. Why are you?
He was just like, he decided to have a little extra, get a little extra with it, you know?
And it's nothing. He's doing kind of like a pale impersonation of other 80s type guitar players just because he can kind of hang with them. So he's like, here's the generic guitar sound that would be for noodling in the noodling moment. And here I am. And it's like, it would be like if I went to the park, say, what if I'm Usain Bolt, right? And I'm at the park and some kids are playing soccer, and for 5 seconds I kick the ball around with them. And then even though I'm a great sprinter, for the rest of my life, everyone talk about what a great soccer player I am with those people.
That's an excellent analogy.
It's like, no, motherfucker. Like, I'm a great sprinter. I just happened to goof around with some 8-year-olds that day. Sorry, I know I'm going on and on, but really fast.
That's good. So the other, because I think one of the things you were talking about, it goes into it too, is his songwriting. And like, he's one of those cats that wrote songs that made other careers, that were a blip on his songwriting like repertoire, but like but for most bands that he wrote them for was their best song.
Yep.
Like, I think he wrote Manic Monday, which, you know, that was like made the Bengals really, until Walk Like an Egyptian came out, or whichever one was first. But and they were great, but I'm just saying they needed that thing. And the same is true with like Sinead O'Connor, and, you know, and you know, the list goes on and on. But like, you know, his songwriting, like, even if you, like, the other day after you invited me to do this, I was like, I'm going to throw some Prince on and go for a bike ride. And I was out for about an hour and a half, you know, riding my bike around. I don't think there was one song that came on like the Apple Music rotation that wasn't like a beast. You know what I mean? That wasn't like a hit, or at least a super well-known jam. I mean, that's got to be probably 17 songs in a row that I listen to that I'm like, oh, this one, oh, that one, you know, like, and it's to be that prolific. And then even to cast off some of that, you know, that gift to people, and just shake off a couple, you know, it's like that monster in Cloverfield that's like walking through the city and little pieces are falling off, and then those things are killing people. Yeah, it's like that. It's like there's little extra songs just flying off of them. Like, hey, go ahead, keep it. You know.
So go ahead.
No, that's it.
So here's another thing. If you look at the history of Black American pop music, and you go back to, say, James Brown, who really was he was an ideologue when it came to one thing, which is landing on the one hard. So there was a lot of rhythmic rub in James Brown's arrangements, which I think is fair to say that the DNA of James Brown will lead to Prince. I think that's a fair back track. You can go to James Brown. So the thing is, like, part of what made James Brown really special is his arrangements evolved right around the time of I Feel Good to have a lot of rub. Like, if you listen to the sax and the bass line, they're playing the same line, but they're not synced up together rhythmically. And that's all on purpose. But then when the one lands, there's going to be a hard kick drum, and the whole band is going to hit that one. And if you don't, he's going to dock your pay. Like, it's that serious. And
you know that one, right? $5.
Yeah.
Anytime anybody fucked up, he's like, flash him a 5.
Yep. Exactly. So now that tradition has held true in dance music, but for the most part, all pop music that owed a debt to black music, all through the 70s and everything, and even now, the one hits hard. Well, Prince was the first one I ever heard to do like a pop song that would be a hit on dance floors and everything, that dodged the one completely. Because if you listen to When Doves Cry, he's deliberately dodging the one. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
ding, 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 ding. And there's a but he doesn't do it. Yeah.
yeah. Even American reggae music, they would reinsert a downbeat, a heavy downbeat for the one, even though reggae music avoids the one. But Prince brought that into our consciousness, and no one noticed. It frustrates me. It's annoying.
The other thing I think that when you're making comparisons to people like James Brown with him is his ability to build a band that would
Yes.
live up to his standards. And in this movie, Sheila E. is the greatest drummer ever. And she's like a combination of like John Bonham and like Clyde Stubblefield from the James Brown band. Like, I mean, she's so good. And then at the end, she's super hot and she comes out and she raps. And she's got this weird one-legged like leotard on where one leg is nude and one leg has got a leotard. It's all pink and of course, or purple or whatever. And she comes out and she raps and like blazes at this rap. And then she goes back and gets back into her rock stuff drumming. But like they show her drumming, and I swear like people like Tommy Lee stole ideas from her, like all these like flashy drummers, because man, she just kills it. It's so good. And then she's the whole time. And she doesn't even crack a sweat. She's just like, what's up? I'm super hot. I'm ripping it. I'm a woman. I'm a woman of color. I'm killing it. It's amazing. There are no drummers like me. I mean, she was like this kind of, and still is, this kind of unicorn, and it's like, and the whole band that he got for that session, she was like leading the band. And that's the kind of thing you can also tell he's sort of like feels very confident in having someone like her run the show while he's busy being Prince. So, on stage, you know what I mean? And it's so fun to watch because she just is, and it's filmed so well where like there are great camera crane shots right above her, and she's just like just screaming and beating him, and it's just so good. So he built a band all the time that was like the ability to do it.
You should check out Questlove's Supreme podcast. There's a lot of analysis of Prince, and he actually does a show for like somewhere between 2 and 3 hours where he's talking to that band, members of the band.
Yeah.
And man, you'll get some stories on that.
I definitely got to check it out. I've heard that from more than one person. I need to listen to that podcast.
It's really good. No matter who he talks to, because they actually explore musical ideas and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like do you ever listen to the, not that we're getting into unpaid advertisement for other podcasts, but the Christian McBride podcast? You ever listen to that? He's a jazz bass player. He's a dude that's like kind of younger in the jazz world. I mean, he's not young, but he's probably like in his 40s or whatever.
I know who he is.
Yeah.
I've never
heard like his podcast is great because he talks to dudes and they just talk about like hip hop and blues and rock and lots of jazz. And most of the cats he talks to are like these session guys. But all those jazz guys know everything about everything. They're not just like, I'm a jazz head. They're like, know what Eric Clapton was doing. They know what like Prince was doing, and it's fun to hear these guys talk. And of course, they're the kind of cast too that can like, much like Questlove, can like play everything.
Yeah.
They can play it all. Like, oh, you mean like this? It's like, but yeah, so that was my pick for my next thing was Sign of the Times with the peace sign, the times.
Gotta love it. All right, it's my turn, huh?
Yeah. I'm just trying to wrangle you along here, Dogie, or else we'll talk about Prince for another 20 minutes.
It's all good. Whatever. So I'm going to choose one of two of my Jonathan Demme directed concert films. I have two of them directed by Jonathan Demme, most famous for directing Silence of the Lambs, but he also did my favorite concert films. So I thought I had a DVD of it sitting here, but I don't. Stop Making Sense by the Talking Heads.
Excellent choice, dude.
That movie is unbelievable. And talk about a great band. That is one of the greatest.
Yeah, everybody in that band is.
Yeah, they've got obviously the Talking Heads. So you've got Chris, Tina, David, Jerry. But in addition to them, you have a huge band with Bernie Worrell from Funkadelic. You've got Steve, I think it's Salas or somebody playing bongos. They do not have Adrian Belew on this one, but that's fine. And I'll tell you why in a sec. They've got Alex Weir on guitar.
Yeah, that guy's so great.
Golly, he's great. They've got these terrific background singers that used to travel with them and the ones that sang on Remain in Light.
And they're like the coolest, like they're so cool. They're backup singers.
Best.
They're like those like inner city cheerleader, like you feel like that is the coolest person I've ever seen, you know? Like, yeah.
And basically, if people haven't seen it, the whole idea is that they start the concert with just David Byrne and acoustic guitar playing along with a beat that's coming off of a little boombox cassette. And then they keep adding things. They build an entire elaborate set, and they bring one player in at a time. And then they basically go from one guy with an acoustic guitar to a giant production with screens and crazy lights and a huge band, and throughout the course of the concert. All along the way, the band is going absolutely bonkers. They're jumping around. There's running. David Byrne is running laps around.
It never ends. Like he's doing the Running Man basically for 2 hours. Yeah.
Running in place while playing.
And not missing a note on his guitar or singing. Like he hits everything perfectly.
The whole band. And I don't know if you've heard the stories about why they were so amped on that tour. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So this was the period where they developed a pretty severe cocaine habit.
I was going to say, was it obviously?
But the story is that they had this big band and this big set, and the pay was pretty rough for the supporting cast, if you will, based on everything that, the costs were high, but they all wanted to do this thing. What happened is, as their addiction got worse, the band, so maybe the backup, I don't know who it was, but they say that the band, the auxiliary band, and all of the workers that were helping them with, the what do they call the people? The people that move
roadies?
Stagehands and
okay.
roadies. Yeah, the roadies and the stagehands were dealing coke to the band and really pushing it on them, because then they were making money enough to be on this tour.
Yeah.
And it got really out of hand. And so the band is just absolutely rip snorting, no pun intended.
Or pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. But man, and that movie is so great. And one of the reasons I'm okay with Adrian Belew, one of my favorite guitar players, from being on this performance is that Alex Weir, who plays second guitar, is one of the most fierce session rhythm players when it comes to funk ever. I mean, the guy is just in there. And what happens is you get people completely underestimate David Byrne as a guitar player. His rhythm playing is so freaking special. And he's playing this vintage 60s Stratocaster, which that movie launched a combination of that and old Buddy Guy records launched my obsession with Stratocasters.
That Strat is so great in that. It's so beat, that sunburst beat up. It's so cool. Yeah.
The beat up 62. But his playing style is kind of like he was going for this kind of African thing. Even when he wasn't playing so-called world music, he was always influenced by high life and those West African, Fela Kuti, and he was playing that really muted, wonderful style. And his lead playing was very kind of horn-like, He used no vibrato except for the whammy bar. So like, actually, I have here.
I just happen to have an axe handy.
I always if it's not planned, these always sit here. This is Greenie, and I have another one over here, another Stratocaster. But it's that I don't know if I can do it. This is embarrassing because I didn't think about this. But if I was David Byrne,
now, are you going to do this while running? Are you going to do this while running in place?
While running, right? So he just does this like. And he just burns the house down, as the song would say. And then his lead playing, he does like this kind of like just simple notes. You know, just like really, but with, you know, distortion and no vibrato.
That speaking of that version of Burning Down the House on that is lights out. It's so good, man. And you could tell the band is like, yeah, like that was like right when that song was hitting, and they were like, this song is fucking awesome. Ah! They were like so into it, you know.
And the synth solos from Bernie are just so outrageous. I mean, I'll sit there and just his tension, how he like uses a little pitch bar and just and he's just behind the beat, and it just crushes my soul.
Yeah, just such a genius synth player. Like you can hear all the stuff that he brought to Parliament, like. Because I think in Parliament he was even more than Funkadelic, he was more of a voice, and like he had more fun. Because Funkadelic just wanted a B3 guy, really. They didn't want like
right.
But like Parliament, they wanted like all that like flashlight and all that stuff. They wanted all that wow, you know, that crazy, those tones, and experiment a little bit, and like Bio Aqua Jam, you know, all that like all those like. Early Parliament, mid-Parliament records, you can hear that in that performance or in those records that he played on. But here's some notes I took of that movie while I was rewatching. You ready?
Yeah.
First of all, the Pablo Ferro intro, the titles.
Yes.
Because Pablo Ferro did those, and he did like Men in Black, and
he did the lettering.
Yeah, did the lettering, and he did like Doctor Strangelove stuff. He was like, I did a little research on him. He was like a director. He co-directed a lot of movies you've heard of, but those titles are like, it's one of those things to me, like everything should be those titles because they're so cool, you know.
Well, you know, David Byrne and I think Tina and them, they really wanted that. They all met at the Rhode Island School of the Arts. So they are actually visual artists first, and they're very particular about every aspect of things, and they wanted that specific artist to do the lettering.
It's perfect. I mean, it goes hand in hand. You think of the cover, and you think of, you know, that suit and those letters, you know.
Yep.
Here's one thing I made a note of. David Byrne, super good frontman, underrated frontman, like just as like a frontman, like not even as a guitar player, but like very confident and funny, but like not like he puts on a little bit of a face, but it's more just like he's a really good front guy. Like he's just good. Like I remember when I saw David Bowie, I was like, I'm in an arena, but this guy makes it feel like I'm in my living room with this guy, you know, like because he could just control everything with like being. And Paul Stanley from Kiss is like that too. Very like can control the whole room just by hanging out. And, you know, the whole room meaning like an arena. And David Byrne, super underrated at doing that. I mean, like he's really good, like confident. All the words are like well, you know, delivered and, you know, perfectly delivered. All the vocals are great, but like he's really strong, you know, like.
Yeah, one could argue that David Byrne is more like he makes your living room feel like an arena.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's like the opposite, but yeah, that's true. That beat up Strat, I had that on there on my list. Bernie Worrell, I had that on my list, just with like 3 exclamation points. I got exhausted after the rewatch. I was tired and sweaty just sitting at my computer watching it. But here's the thing about this movie that I remember from when I saw it at the theater, and that I think is still true. I can only imagine what people must have been like when they saw them at CBGB's and they first started. They must have been like,
Yep.
"What is this?" Because this concert, they're always 2 seconds away from this thing being a shitty drum circle, like that you'd see at like the park, like with like a bunch of like half-talented hippie dudes, playing hacky sack and like drum circle, bring in your kids and like, come on everybody, let's dance in unison. But
Yeah.
then they just right the ship the last moment and rip it to where it like loses that happy family bouncy vibe and gets back into the grit. Like exactly what we're talking about, like when Burning Down the House comes in. It's right at that time when they're like, you kind of feel like they're all like smiling and dancing in unison, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Oh, ooh, they rip. Okay, and then it like brings back up with this like beef, like, and they can actually back it up with some real. I think Weir is part of that and stuff.
But you have to remember that they weren't doing that kind of material at CBGB's.
Well, no, I know, but I'm just saying, like, even with what they were doing, I'm sure people probably had seen like television, and that was it. They were like, "What is this?" Like, But
it'd be interesting to go back in time.
yeah, because I mean, I've played CB's a bunch of times, and I know that crowd from when I played there. I mean, it's not obviously the same and not the same impact, but I just know the expectations of that crowd are always kind of like.
I hear you, but I honest to God though, I hear what you're saying, but I think in 1977 it was a different thing. I mean, we're
Oh
talking.
yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I'm not comparing my 90s trips to there, but I just know that there's a certain sheen to that place that I don't know how it went over. It probably went over great. It's not like they were suffering from not being loved. So
they were one of the bands that took off because of their performances there.
yeah. So those were the things I took away from that was all those things. Just David Byrne, man, so cool. Very, very cool. Still cool. Still really,
Oh, cool.
like just like a nerd superhero, like nerds were like, yes, my dude is here,
Yeah. Okay, your turn.
Live at Pompeii.
One of my favorites, dude, all time.
All right, so Live at Pompeii. Here's the deal with that movie.
Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah, sorry, Pink Floyd. For those who don't know, if you're watching this, you probably had an idea, but yeah. So Pink Floyd, Live at Pompeii. I did some Wikipediaing on the story of how this came together because it's such a crazy idea, and like supposedly the story is that their manager was out scouting places for them to film a live movie, and he went sightseeing with his family and he lost his wallet and he had to go back to the arena at Pompeii to go pick it up because he dropped it or something. Sure. And he went in and he was like on the second viewing of going back with no one there but him, he was like, this would be a really cool place, man. This would be great. And so like they decided to like do it there, which is so arbitrary. What an arbitrary decision.
With
like,
no audience.
Yeah, with no audience. But so there's so many things about this movie that like that like hit all the right things in my brain perfectly. Like I love Pink Floyd. I didn't always love Pink Floyd, but like I grew to love them over time.
Yeah.
Like I always loved like my mom always played Dark Side of the Moon, so I always kind of heard that album. But like I kind of was like, whatever. But then over the last, I don't know, maybe like when I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, I started to get like, oh, they're awesome. Like I get it, like I started to get it. And the older I get, the more I like them, But there's so many things about this movie that hit the like the censored, like I just love the weird starkness of them in this empty, 500,000-year-old arena or whatever it is, not 500,000 year, but and whatever. Yeah, and like so it's so invasive, like just politically, like like they're in there with all this machinery and all this like ridiculous keyboards and insane amps, and they're just in there like ripping it by themselves, kind of like But the one thing will be always the coolest thing ever is that in Echoes Part 1 when it goes to that funk part at the end.
That's what I was going to talk about.
Yeah, well, I'll let you talk about it. But the camera, the camera tracks there's only a few times it does it, but it tracks past that back of the Marshalls or the whatever they're playing, and it's got that Pink Floyd London stencil on it, which
Yeah.
is super invasive. Like
So
we're here, like we're back, like we're fighting, and like it's just so invasive, and then that camera pans and you can kind of see them between the cracks of the amps, and it's just, man, it's just so cool. It's like everything about it is perfect. That song, one of my favorite songs ever, and then that perfectly shot tracking of the that film, very cinematic. Like that's what pulls this thing off together is the cinematography being so insane. Like they didn't just shoot it; they like shot it. Like where they like did these tracking shots. There's the shot where the camera rises up over the soundboard. It's like that is lights out.
So that first, from the opening of that film to the end of Echoes and that particular funk breakdown you're talking about, that alone is worth the price of admission. That if that was the whole film, it would be in the top 10.
Yep, I agree.
And that with Roger Waters playing that precision bass with the pick and the bright tone.
And his weird claw hand, like, yeah, it's like so cool, yeah.
And it's the really dry drums. And that is a sound I would never pursue in my own music. And yet when they do that incredibly dry sounding thing, and then David Gilmour with the reverbed out fuzz guitar, oh my God, it's just so powerful. It's just such a powerful sound.
There's something about their sound during that era, especially where there's that pick bass and the keyboard, like I forget his name, the keyboard guy.
Mason?
No, that's the drummer.
Yeah.
Nick Mason. Wright or whatever, I can't remember his name. I'll think of it. But
someone's throwing their beer can at the computer.
Yeah, I know. They're like, you jerks. But they're like, but it's got that plink of the keyboard and the clunk of the bass, but then the guitar is so spaced out that like it leaves this room for that drive to come right through. It's just great, And they pulled it off so well. The performance, I don't know how many times they did everything, but like the performances are like just stellar,
So good.
So a couple of the things about it too are there's a lot of Nick Mason in this movie, a lot of drums, a lot of video of him playing drums. I think because maybe he was the most active, or maybe because he's in the middle of the action, but it's like his movie. Like he's the star of the movie. It's like a drum show.
Well, he's certainly a spectacle.
Yeah.
And I think they greatly overestimated his drumming talents.
Well, and then he whips out that butterfly like tight shirt. He's rocking that thing, and
one of the greatest movies that somehow also has one of the dumbest drum solos ever filmed. Because what is it? Careful with that axe, Eugene.
Yeah.
Where they. It's just the worst drum solo I've ever heard. Just awful, and yet amazing.
And when he settles into those, like that groove and Echoes, like you were talking about, he's phenomenal. But like,
exactly.
Yeah. But those weird flat toms that they're almost like level to the ground. It's like, I know a lot of dudes played like that, like Mitch Mitchell. That's how he played and stuff. But it's just it's so like on purpose. You know what I mean? Like
it sounds like somebody recorded a really bad 70s, or they recorded a snippet of Neil Peart playing the rototoms, but then they're playing it in slow motion.
Yeah. Well, because what happens is when you have those toms like that, you're doing rim shots on every beat. So it's like dunk. It's got that real doink,
And it's just so rhythmically not interesting. It's just
yeah.
Chuck E. Cheese's drummer.
Yeah, that, and then apparently they went back and did some of that stuff in Paris, and that's why there's those shots of them with like a million lights.
Yeah.
Because they also had to add some stuff, so they just went to a sound stage. and then they just covered it up with like, let's add 50,000 giant spotlights, so you can tell. I think like the keyboard dude, he doesn't have a beard in the French one, in the French shots. That's like how you can tell the difference.
I never thought about that. You're right.
Yeah, that was the thing that, I mean, again, this is just Wikipedia. Like Richard Wright. Yeah, well, I was right. Richard Wright.
No, he's right.
Yeah, well, he's right, but I was correct. Yeah. But yeah, so to me, like that movie is like that. The Set the Controls of the Heart of the Sun in that old, ridiculous. I mean, not ridiculous, but that old that amphitheater. I mean, those two things clashing together in this weird space-time continuum. I mean, it's so perfect. It's like the greatest perfect. I'm like freaking out over here.
And parts of it you could almost mix into like Conan the Barbarian or something.
Yeah, there's like those weird. There's like scenes of them walking across Pompeii, and they're like, they all like stop and like stoop down to look at like a bubbling hole in the ground of lava, and they all like, like it's and these weird low cinematic shots of them just like walking around. It's so weird.
And then suddenly there's footage of them sitting in a diner, and like, and it's like, it's not like the machines are controlling us. That would be strange. It'd be an interesting experiment, wouldn't it? To just have some strangers with the same technology and see what art they made. I think we'd fare better. You know, just so weird. And then they're back.
There are a lot of those like long shots of like the weird statues and fountain, like those weird faces.
Yeah.
The decay, like the crossfade is like a 2-minute crossfade. Like when the lights start coming through, it's great.
You ready for the next one?
I'm ready, dude. Hit it.
Here's my other Jonathan Demme picture. Rust Never Sleeps.
Oh, baby.
So Neil Young and Crazy Horse. And I'm not even going to talk that much about this film. It's just that everyone has to see this thing. It's got some of the greatest guitar tones ever put.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And it's all just tweed amps cranked up. For some reason, they decided to create a set with all these giant things, like a giant harmonica and giant microphones and giant amplifiers. And there's Jawas from Star Wars setting up the stuff, and they have words for all these items. I don't know what I honestly don't know anything. As much as I love Neil Young and I have many Neil Young books, I almost don't want to know the depths of the origin story of the ideas, because it's just such a strange thing that got created, and really is the music, the songs, the material, the lyrics, some of the greatest, the performances, but then it's also steeped in this bizarre soup of imaginary fantasy weirdness that is earthy. It's not like science fiction, and it's not a hippie dream. It's more like a uniquely 70s, somewhere between hippie and punk and Where Am I Americana, blazing tweeds, and then half the show is all acoustic and folk. It's almost like you're watching an era dissolve into another, and it's like an era of juke joints and coffee houses and dive bars, and then somehow traveling through this kind of Robert Crumb 70s montage and winding up in a drive-in theater watching a crazy science fiction movie in the late 70s. It's like this crazy blur of cultural experience, but all of that I just described is a context in which there is this incredible Neil Young concert. I just don't even understand how it happens.
Well, I think that one that is, I think you could say the same very thing about Neil Young as an artist himself. Like, he's always been this cat that like can just sort of like go for it and do his thing and not have to like, other than a few albums, like, I mean, there are more than a few, but like, you know, like American Stars and Bars or something that's just pretty much a rock album. But like for the most part, he'll do all sorts of weird shit that like just doesn't even add up to anything eventually, or it does, but it's amalgamate of like four thoughts, like a country band meets a German industrial, like, I mean, there's just so many things that he does that are like that. So I kind of like feel what you're saying there.
And this record set the stage for another live record that he did. This is not a movie, just a record, but a three disc set called Arc Weld. Do you know that one?
Yeah, that one was that was like a big during the grunge era.
Yeah, because it coexisted. It came out in the early 90s, and he had Dinosaur and Sonic Youth and bands like that as opening band on the tour. Very strange. But that record has some of my favorite guitar tones that have ever been created. And that's for guitar nerds only. If you want to hear the complete and utter realization of a madman guitar sculptor trying to create ultimate garage sludge tones, but make them sound as big as the earth itself. That record, Arc Weld, it is just, there's a song, if anybody's just curious enough to look, the song Love to Burn from Arc Weld, it's live. That might be the absolute pinnacle of scorched earth tweed meltdown, tweed Fender 50s amp meltdown of all time. It just that sends me, and it's something that I've been chasing all my life. So anyway, the whole thing is just magnificent.
A good pick. That's a good pick, man. Not much more you can say. It's awesome.
It's awesome. What's your next one?
So my next one is a movie called Watt Stacks, which I don't even know that it actually ever was actually released as a movie, but it's lived on like YouTube and in like on bootleg video cassettes. So for those people who don't know what this movie is, basically it was like Stax did this tribute to the Watts riots concert, like 10 years after the thing. Hang on one second. Let me, because there's something I want to find this one thing here.
While you're doing that, just to be clear, we're talking about the 1968 riots, or?
Yeah. So the 65 riots.
I'm sorry, 65.
Yeah.
My history blurred in my brain.
Yep. And so I'm just getting all these details right on this while I'm looking at it. So it was at the LA Coliseum in 1972. So Stax put together this lineup of all these crazy, all these bands. And I mean, it was like an all-day thing. And what happened was, so the movie itself, if you've never seen it, is it's about half music and half of it is like dudes talking. One of those dudes is Richard Pryor, like right at his height. And he's like doing this kind of private stand-up. And so he's talking about what it's like in the Black experience at that time and like dealing with police and all these things. But he's being super funny. But there's only like 10 people in the room when he's talking. It's this little thing. And he's on fire. It's like, again, like it's almost like a Richard Pryor, like, concert as well as like a rock concert, but that like separate things. Yeah. So he's taught, I mean, it's some of his best material he's ever done. And it's like this really thoughtful, funny, Richard Pryor telling it like it is kind of stuff. But it's weird because there's a lot of other people, a lot of the musicians are talking. I think they'd kind of film these interviews right around the day, maybe backstage and maybe the day before and the day after, maybe kind of thing. But one of the people that's in it quite a bit, and he's kind of like a radical, like kind of like a Black Power person, and it's really weird, is Ted Lang, who is Isaac from The Love Boat, the bartender from The Love Boat.
What?
This guy? Yeah. So he's in it a lot, and he's super like talking, like telling you, man, about oppression and like Black Power. I mean, it's not, and you cannot deny. I mean, it's him. It's very obviously him. So somewhere along the line, whether it was during that time or right after, he got a job as your bartender on the Love Boat and decided that all that was fine. But yeah, it's, I don't know, but he's great in it. I mean, they're all great. They're all talking about, just life and what it's like and the struggles. And but then it'll cut back. I'm not going to read you all the people that played on this thing, but like they're like the Bar-Kays, the Staple Singers, like William Bell, Rance Allen, Carla Thomas, the Bar-Kays. I think I said that already. And the Bar-Kays are amazing in it. Oh, Rufus Thomas comes out and does the Funky Chicken. It's ridiculous. But like, so the whole thing basically is headlined by Isaac Hayes. Okay. So there's all this talk that Isaac Hayes isn't going to be able to make it. And they don't know if he's going to make it. And there's like this whole kind of narrative running through the whole movie that, well, is Isaac going to get here? What's going to happen? So finally at the end, and this is like the best part. Well, not the best part, but one of the best parts. Oh, Albert King is also in it. Super ridiculous. Like he's, again, height of his power, 72, just punching you in the face. Like so good.
When did
and the Staples Singers who were really popular, but like not like you would think of as like, I mean, obviously Pop Staples is super cool, but like they're so good. They're phenomenal. So finally, they get Isaac Hayes into the arena, into the stadium, and he's in this limo. He's pulling up like he does in Escape from New York. Yeah. Like he's like in this giant limo. It doesn't have chandeliers on it, but so he pulls up, and Jesse Jackson is doing the intro, and Jesse Jackson's got a huge afro, and he's wearing this cool dashiki, and he's like giving this great intro where he's like talking about, yeah, our people come together, and we've got here he, and coming in right now is Isaac Hayes, and this thing pulls up, right? So the crowd's going bananas because Isaac's there. The car, the limo pulls. It's kind of like a station wagon limo thing, pulls up behind the stage, and like 4 people get out of the limo, and you can't tell which one is Isaac. So they all kind of get on stage. They're all wearing hats real low and dashikis and stuff. And Jesse Jackson like goes behind all of them, and he grabs one dude's hat, and he pulls it off super slow. And there's like Isaac Hayes' bald head, and everyone's like, oh, and goes crazy. And then they do Shaft. They kick into Shaft, and Isaac Hayes does a saxophone solo for like 20 minutes. It's like blindingly awesome. And the crowd's just going nuts, Before that too, like the Bar-Kays are like the Bar-Kays, you think like they're cool, but I never was like a Bar-Kays super fan. Like I know some of their songs, but like they were like super, like they look like Funkadelic. They had like big, or like Sly. They had like big white afros and like vests and like cool, like those kind of like weird grease sideways haircuts. So that and the other thing about this movie is so many hip hop samples come from this movie.
Really?
Like, oh, it's amazing how many. I'm the son of a bad. Like, there's so many. Yeah, every time you watch it, you'll hear someone yell into a microphone into the audience, which is vast.
Yeah.
And it's a sample. Like, tons of Public Enemy stuff comes from it. Like, if you just watch the movie in the first 20 minutes, when the music starts, you'll hear samples from every movie, and it's mostly like stage raps. Like different people doing stage raps, and you'll be like, "Oh, I know that burned in my brain. I didn't know where that came from." Yeah, it's so good. And I remember when I saw this movie the first time, my friend Alec Morton, who's the bass player in this band called Raging Slab, we used to tour with them a lot and stuff. And me and our guitar player Brad, we used to always, when we'd go to New York City, we'd stay with Alec in Brooklyn, because it was free to stay there, and he lived right in the middle of Brooklyn back when it was kind of older Brooklyn. And he had this video cassette of this movie, and we drank a bottle of scotch and watched. I'd never seen it before. We just sat there and watched the whole thing. It's pretty long. It's like 2.5 hours. And it like totally reshaped the way I think of music and live performances and concerts. It's so crazy. It's just a really good, really like, it's a real document. I'm glad that they filmed it, because like obviously this could have gone by the way. They could have not filmed it and no one ever known it would have happened. It would have been like this thing that was so amazing, but then was gone,
Yeah.
And the fact that they went to the trouble to document it, it's super good. And then like Rufus Thomas is like so good in it. You know, I mean, the dude like basically invented rock, and he's like there, like just throwing down. Albert King's super good. Like just the staple singers are great. Just everyone is just great in it, and like they're all like excited to be there. There's this like energy to it. They're all real positive. Like they want to make this into like a celebration and not like a, you know, like a negative thing. But they also they kind of talk about, you know, like the issues at hand, and it's just really, it's great. It's super good. So if you haven't seen it, most of it is on YouTube, I think.
I'm gonna do for my next ones. I'm gonna do a lightning round for sake of time. And I know because I know you have a really good one, and I want to hear about it.
Mine's the obvious one, but go ahead.
It's okay. It's got to be talked about. So these are two. One obvious. One might be new for people. The song Remains the Same by Zeppelin. Everybody, well, not everybody, but people might critique it because it's like, but that's when Zeppelin was this big, bloated 70s, whatever. And I'm like, no, that's why that's great.
Yeah.
Like, you're, because what's different is they are that big, ridiculous, bloated, it's at Madison Square Garden, the ultimate 70s rock and roll fantasy private jet, wreck the hotel room band. But they are authentically that.
Yeah.
Like this is a rare window into a human experience that maybe 4 or 5 bands in the history of the world have authentically been.
Right.
And I don't care what anybody says. The playing, people will be like, oh, it's sloppy, whatever. It's perfect.
Yeah.
To me, it is absolutely, yes, they were a better band in different footage in terms of
course, right.
If you want to be snobby about it. But in terms of just having a Zeppelin experience of ultimate, like just Bonham, just,
yeah,
it is it. I mean,
yeah.
Page is up there, just, it's noodling, it's off, but he can play anything he wants because John Paul Jones is holding down the earth like he's the very sun. And, Bonham is just completely, it's the thickest, fattest grooves you've ever heard in your life. Unbelievable.
Probably the definitive Stairway to Heaven version, I would say, you know, like.
Dude, I mean, everything. That I could cry, for real, despite it being shallow, ultimate, you know, even though they're a British band, kind of like American consumerist excess rock, which is something that I find distasteful. I could weep at the beauty of when they do, what's the one? Since I've Been Loving You.
Yeah.
I mean, I could weep.
Yeah.
I could weep. It's so good.
Yeah, that's, I think, like you hit the nail exactly on the head of, like, there's like this idea of rock bands being this bloated monster, but that was the paradigm. They were beyond like the Stones, they were beyond the Who. And I mean, they all were wild men at their time, wild packs of wild animals, but they were the template of that, that all these, like, did you ever read Hammer of the Gods? They talk about, like, John Bonham would like go to a hotel room and fill the tub with baked beans and bring in hook. I mean, it's just insane. It's just like
the fish story.
Yeah. The fish story, of course,
We won't go into it, but the fish did go into it.
Yes, there you go. And, like, I think bands like Van Halen tried. You're proud of that, aren't you?
A little bit. It was spur of the moment, so.
I like it. You should be proud. And like just even the beginning when Peter Grant's outside, like their manager, Peter Grant's like, I suppose it's all right if it's got fucking Led Zeppelin written right on it, right? You're just allowed to sell that then, Nate. Like
part of the posters.
Yeah.
And Plant says, were they good? And he goes, it was the posed photo. They're all like, not that photo.
Yeah, it's like I remember, but when I think of this movie, it's like the equivalent of like when, like, they were the band that I think they were the first band that had their own airplane.
I'm sure.
And it's just so excessive. Like now it's really not, but then it was. It's just such a, And then there's those weird vignettes of like Robert Plant at his home in the Viking land with his wife and the kids.
Yeah.
It's just bananas. It's so bananas.
Age becomes an infant, and then he comes back as a wizard.
John Paul Jones John Bonham's like racing cars, and it's just.
It's so stupid and amazing.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal.
One of my favorite Jeff Nelson stories is he went and saw Zepp, and it was great because Jeff was saying that I was like, "Wow, you went and saw Zeppelin?" He's like, "Yeah," and in classic, Jeff is not an elitist, but he does things that would be what an elitist would say, and so he'll do. He's like, I'm like, so you saw, because he's a drummer, so I'm thinking he's, so you went and you saw Bonham do Moby Dick live? And he goes, I went to the bathroom for Moby Dick. That's so Jeff.
Yeah.
He just, Moby Dick.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that stuff's boring. I like the Cramps.
So funny.
It's so funny.
Yeah, but I think that touches on an interesting thing about Zeppelin in general. It's like, I remember when I met the Necros and started hanging out with those guys, they were like, I had gone through my hardcore phase, like in my 13, 14-year-old self. And I met Andy when I was like 15. And I expected them to be like, did you hear the new blah, 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 Black Flag record or whatever? And like when I met Andy and Barry and Todd and Ron, they were all like, all they wanted to listen to was Zeppelin, AC/DC, and Deep Purple. That's all they wanted to listen to. And I'm like, and I thought of that stuff as kind of like FM 104 rock that I had skipped, And then when I started to listen to it when I was like a later teen, I'm like, I get it. Okay. I understand,
That was Jeff Nelson's thing. He didn't care about Bonham. He liked Ian Pace.
Yeah. Which I think most drum nerds will tell you the same thing,
Kinda. It kind of depends, right?
I mean, he's not that Bonham isn't drum nerd god, but I'm just saying, there's definitely a vocal Ian Pace camp. How's that?
Well, yeah, think of it this way: Jeff Nelson does not swing.
Right.
He doesn't swing beat. And what makes John Bonham cool is that he comes from big band style, so he plays a little bit that way. And it doesn't always fit exactly, which is what gives it that push and pull. But Ian Pace can be very surgical, and that's how Jeff Nelson is he generates propulsion by being surgical. People used to say, like, because when we recorded the Fast Piece record with Jeff, I would have like I would set it up when we mixed it, kind of like an 8th note echo strict on the drums. But all of this was just outboard. I would run it out to a tape echo. And so it would be set, and that 8th note would be an 8th note at the beginning, and it would still be an 8th note at the end. You know what I mean? Like, people would be like, yeah, man, you can set your watch to Jeff Nelson. I'm like, fuck that. You can set the revolutions of the universe to Jeff Nelson. Like, the watch is listening to the universe and the magnets and the quartz. It's all off of Jeff Nelson. Like,
that's hilarious. Yeah.
All day.
And it's like right on, like coming in for a landing, like
like a fucking jackhammer.
What is that thing about Charlie Watts? Like, all the clocks in all the world are set to Charlie Watts drumming. It's like,
my ass.
Yeah, Jeff Nelson's drumming.
Yeah, but Charlie Watts, the only thing that's not set to Charlie Watts' drumming is his hi-hat. I love that.
Splash, yeah.
No hi-hat during snare hit. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
You want to hear an Ian Pace story real quick?
Do it.
So we opened for Five Horse Johnson, opened for Deep Purple at Pine Knob.
Holy crap.
We took Ted Nugent's spot. Ted Nugent didn't want to play a local show opening for it was Leonard Skinner and Deep Purple. And it was Ted Nugent, Leonard Skinner, and Deep Purple. But Ted didn't want to play because he didn't want to open, which I can understand. Whatever.
So they called Purple. You got to have a pretty big ego to be like, I'm not opening for these clowns.
Yeah, but it was in Detroit, so I kind of get it, So they called us and said, hey, do you guys want Ted's slot? It's you're going to play for 20 minutes. We're like, yes. So we went out, we went to Pine Knob and we played our set. And so we played and it went really well. And, we're like huge Deep Purple freaks, as it is. So we were really excited just to even be around them.
Yeah.
Like, backstage kind of seeing like, oh, there's, there's Roger Glover over there. There's Ian Pace and there's Ian Gillan, like, holy shit, like, oh my God, my favorite singer, one of my favorite singers. So we played our set and went back to at Pine Knob. When you play, there's like a little hallway off the stage, and then there's these dressing rooms. And there's enough for everybody to have their own dressing room. I think there is. But so we had our own dressing room. So I was all sweaty. So we get back to the room, and I take a quick shower in the bathroom and dry off, and I come out, and I open the door of the shower, and I see our bass player and drummer standing there going, and I'm like, what are Mike and Steve doing? And I open the door more, and Roger Glover and Ian Pace are in our dressing room talking to them. And they're like, you guys were so great. And then Ian Pace looked at me and he goes, I felt it in me balls. And he like grabbed his balls. And I was like, oh, and we were like, thanks. We love you guys. You're the reason, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, that was great. And then Roger Glover told Steve, our bass player, that he was standing behind his cabinet the whole set. And Steve's like, well, I'm fucking glad I didn't know that. Like,
Yeah.
That would have been like, but anyway, I digress.
I wish I had a story like that. That's such a great story.
It was, well, trust me, it's one of the few I have, so I'm going to be milking them till I'm dead.
So I'll tell you what, I have another one that I'm going to save for another day.
Now I want to know what it is.
Well, I'll tell you what it is, but I could talk. I'm going to talk too much about it, and I'll run out of time before we get to yours. So,
all right.
But my other one that is super pivotal for me, the one I'm going to mention and the one you're going to mention are two more movies that I watched endlessly with Jeff Luce when we were playing. So, The Year Punk Broke, Sonic Youth. It's Sonic Youth, Dinosaur, Nirvana, Hole, Mudhoney, Babes in Toyland, on tour in Europe together. Right while they're on tour, this is when, remember, Nevermind only printed up like 40,000 copies of the Nirvana Nevermind record, the first pressing. And so they didn't know it was going to be a hit. No one expected it. So Nirvana was opening for Sonic Youth on their European tour while Nirvana took off in the States, or started to. So what you're seeing is a rare glimpse of them all on tour having fun before stardom came in. So it's called The Year Punk Broke, and it's a great historical study of a very misunderstood time, the early 90s, with some of the greatest of the late 80s post-punk people and the greatest Sonic Youth performances. And Thurston is just hilarious. Have you ever seen it?
I've never seen that movie. No. I've seen all those bands, but never seen that movie.
I cannot recommend it highly enough. Thurston Moore is doing this kind of like almost this ridiculous character as they gallivant around Europe, where he's like going to street vendors where they have sausages, and he's pretending, he's almost like doing this idiot American character, and it's so good. It's like the best comedy, where he's just walking up to this array of sausage. He's like, so I'm here with the knockwurst and the brockwurst and the currywurst and all the worst. So what's the difference between all these wursts? So like basically the pig is like a different kind of pig, and he's just like so obnoxious. And then there's this, at the fairground, there's this giant sculpture of a hog head near the sausage vendor, and they're like in Germany. These people don't even speak English. They have no idea what he's talking about. And he's like, I'm like hungry. I'm hungry, baby. And I need to get me a pig's head. Now, anybody know, where can I find a pig's head? And he's just going on and showing up. He's talking to these, these poor people. And he's just like screaming at them on the street, go forth and thrash. You know, it's just so preposterous.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's a hilarious dude.
Yeah, and
All those guys were pretty funny.
he's got like, there's like, I have this Sonic Youth book. I'm just opening it to a random page, but he'll have like, there's like a poster. This isn't it, but he's just like, there'll be like a poster, and he's like describing it to the camera for no freaking reason whatsoever. And he's like, you can see here in the poster, there's a lead singer singing live. It's not cloned. It's not fake. It's just fucking live, man. Like, it's just so ridiculous, but classic. And the performances are some of the best. And if you've ever seen the video for Lithium, where Nirvana, the whole video is just footage of them smashing things, that's all footage taken from this movie.
That's awesome.
Because the whole movie is hours and hours of Nirvana smashing everything in sight. Sonic Youth throwing vintage guitars into the air and watching them clatter into the stage. You know, just utter destruction in a time that just doesn't, it's just a world that we don't live in anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like that time is, at least for now, seems to be kind of gone. like I think once, I don't know, there's like a group of bands that kind of hung on to that a little bit, like Brian Jonestown Massacre or something like that. But I think for the most part, it's kind of gone. So
it doesn't mean anything now.
Right, exactly. Nobody wants to behave like that anymore.
Well, then what are you rebelling against? You know?
Right. You know, everyone's nice. You know, it's like everyone's kind of like cool now. Kids are cool.
And plus, we actually, if we want to stand up against the establishment, we fucking burn a police headquarters to the ground. We don't smash a guitar.
Right. Exactly.
Everything's digital. What are they going to do? Smash the software?
Pro Tools, down with Pro Tools.
I'm pushing this button to engage my new virus I created that will wipe out Pro Tools.
Delete.
Yeah. I deleted all your files. You know.
Oh, good times.
All right, man. So you're going to talk about what may be one of the greatest film masterpieces in the rock world that's ever been made. Am I right?
I got the Molly Whopper right here, buddy. I felt kind of dumb even mentioning this movie just because it felt kind of like a corn dog move that everyone would do, kind of like, but at the same time, it sort of defined what a concert movie is in a way. It's the Last Waltz by the band. I think we all kind of, yep. I got one of those back here. You know, every time I watch this movie, it's funny. I always come away with different feelings. I come away with different thoughts. I mean, it's one of those movies I've seen so many times. Like, you know, it's funny because like, I guess for anyone who doesn't know, it's the band. They were going to wrap up their career and they're going to invite all their past bosses and their past friends and all these people and kind of do one big last celebration concert in San Francisco. And they ended up just troweling out. You know, they were the band that backed up Bob Dylan, famously were hated, and but they backed up Ronnie Hawkins and all these, and they were consummate professionals. And I did some research on this too. It's interesting. Did you know that when they joined Bob Dylan's band, they were recommended by John Hammond to Bob Dylan because John Hammond had played with them on that album, So Many Roads, which is his first solo album, one of my favorite albums of all time. And he told Bob, you should get these guys if you're going to play. If you want a band, this is your band. So Bob hired, he talked to Robbie Robertson, and he hired him and Levon. And he only wanted those two, but they wouldn't do it unless he's like, we're a package deal, Bob. And they had no idea that Bob Dylan was a big deal because they're like, they didn't know. They just didn't care. They just thought he was some folk dude. And so they wouldn't do it unless he hired the whole band. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. So he hired the rest of the group. But like, they did 2 gigs, and then he told them, Robbie told them, we won't do it unless we have the rest of the guys. So that's how the band ended up getting hired. But I think it's funny that like they were like basically like, we're gonna cut out. Screw you, buddy, Mr. Unknown guy.
Well, he had just been doing a Woody Guthrie impression.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much just, out there doing it. But
Still pretty.
um, I think the movie itself is great because the polar opposite of something like Song Remains the Same. There's no frills. There's nothing. It's just these really cool shots, kind of like we were talking about with Pompeii. These really cool shots. And one thing you start to realize when you put something in the hands of this magnitude, and you put it in something like that in the hands of somebody like Martin Scorsese, you get Martin Scorsese. You get those framed shots of like the band playing and the camera's not even moving, but everybody's in the shot. Everybody looks cool AF in the shot. Like when Joni Mitchell comes out, she's one of the, like, to me, like a superhero.
Yeah.
She's just so cool, like just like a cool, weird kind of, again, like a unicorn, like weirdo, but like super cool, and knows everybody. He can hang with the guys, beautiful person in general, and just really cool. But when she comes out, the scene itself with the way it's lit, and it just looks so great. Bobby Robertson, super cool in it.
If I may, I have a take on that, which is,
Okay.
I think most concert films, when people go to shoot a concert, they're a big fan of the thing, and they want to capture the bombast and the spectacle of a concert, which makes sense. And a lot of great concert films are made that way. But the reason that I think the Jonathan Demme films made it into my list, and that this film makes it for both of us and for most people, those directors were filming a happening, not just a concert, but in general, a happening. And they are filming, as directors who film narratives would do, they're capturing relationships between people involved in the happening. So you're still experiencing the bombast of a concert, but the camera is revealing the relationships between the key components, the players, the factoids even. Yeah.
And he manages to capture exactly what you're talking about. Like when Bob Dylan comes out, you can tell that they're kind of nervous.
Yeah.
They're kind of like they don't want to fuck this up. This is like their thing. Because Bob is, always going to be the guy. Even on that whole set of people, including Eric Clapton, he was kind of the guy on that whole night. And they kind of were there because of that. And you could tell they kind of tightened up. And I don't mean like get tight, like nervous. I mean, not get tight like nervous ticks, but like they bring it really down. Like, and the Let Me Follow You Down on that is like one of the greatest. I mean, that song is insane anyway, but and that's another thing. Like that's capturing Bob right at the height where he's just ripping it. I mean, he is so into it when he's doing that. And that song is, let me follow you. And he's screaming, he's jumping around. I mean, normally you just used to seeing him being so cool that it's like too cool. Whereas he was like, just kind of like felt it. He was ripping. It's so good. I think Van Morrison, probably one of the best Van Morrison things ever.
My favorite Van Morrison performance I've ever seen is that movie.
Yeah. And he's so strong. And Butterfield too. Butterfield, great. I mean, so good. It's funny because I was thinking, I wrote some notes on this too. And it's funny because one of the things about this movie is everyone's just like this much past their prime. It's like they're a little doughier. They're going a little bald, a little bit, teeny bit, not a lot, but like Van Morrison's kind of got that round head. Van Morrison starting to come in.
Yeah.
The Irish head, like where he's, and like
Irish head, you bastard.
Well, I got one too, but I'm just German. But the and like the and like Butterfield's getting that kind of like dad look where he's starting to look daddish a little bit, at least like my dad. But
they look a little less dangerous.
Yeah, right. But it's still got that thing. Like when Bob's done playing, like you were saying about those shots, Scorsese pushes right into him and Robbie Robertson, like shaking hands, like kind of obviously this torch passing moment. It's like this perfectly captured, quick 3-second thing where they're like, he's like, great job. He's real proud of them and they're proud to be there. And, it was probably a rocky road, but like they made it through. And
like Ronnie Hawkins is like some kind of, he's like your uncle that shows up at the picnic and he can still hit a three when everybody's got the basketball out.
That's right.
Yes. He's like, oh, let me show you what I can still do. Yeah.
Yeah. And Clapton is, cool. Clapton is Clapton in it. Like I said, Butterfield's great.
And Clapton, where he kind of drops his guitar, his strap comes off, and Robbie Robertson is like, yeah, I got this, and he hangs right in there as good as Clapton until Clapton comes back. It's kind of like, let me remind you why we're the band.
Right, exactly.
I got you, Eric.
Yeah, I got you. And and Robbie Robertson just himself looking that cool with that red scarf and just looking
cool.
Rad. I mean, he's just cool. I just heard a podcast with him recently. There's a really good podcast called Broken Record. It's like I don't know if you ever heard that. It's
Malcolm Gladwell and Rick Rubin. That's a good one, dude. And he talks about scoring and stuff.
Yeah, he talks about like how they started the band and how they met Levon and all these weird stories about how when they started developing like their album and their sound, and when they wrote The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, all the record company people were like, oh, "This is trash. What are you even making?" And they're like, "I don't know. We're just making this thing." And then I forget who it was that told them like, "Don't change anything. This is ridiculous. Like this is perfect. Like trust yourself." I forget who it was that told them, but it's just so good. And everything about this movie is like it feels like an event. Like you said, it's very eventized. It's very like a happening. They really did a good job of conveying that. It's funny, looks cool, sounds cool. Everyone's slaying in it. It's just, it is what it is. It's like as cool as all those guys individually,
And I hate it. This isn't a show about Coke, but there's also that great footage of Neil Young with the giant Coke rock hanging in his mustache. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I think it's an outtake. He's got what looks like a giant white booger. It's like a piece of Coke. He got stuck in his mustache. Yeah. It's so ridiculous.
Perfect. I saw Levon Helm at the Helena, Arkansas Blues Festival with my dad, like probably in like 1998 or 2000, somewhere around there. And that's where he's from. Yeah. And so the Blues Festival is like this it's a good sized blues festival. It grew into a big thing. And, but he headlined that, and it was great. He was so awesome. Just one of those cats, like we were talking about with Bowie, but like doing this from behind the drums that can make invite everyone into his thing, like just really good at like bringing the whole thing in. Like, come on in, 50,000 people. Let's all be homies, And just the way he sings in those performances on that, his drumming and singing's never been more like on display than on that movie, because he's just in there, man. It's just like just the whole thing. He's just, it's just great. I mean, what another unicorn, like what a weirdo, like so good at it.
Really strange, but wonderful.
So this has been fun, man, going through all these and the ones you picked too.
I know. So here's the thing, and I know we're recording a show and everything, but here's like, we've got to, pandemic be damned, we've got to hang out, because there's people in this area that when I came back from California, I'm supposed to be friends with, and it kind of, that whole system of creating those connections got interrupted. So we just have to figure out a way. I need a social life. This is me. It's a cry for help, dude. I need friends, man. And I'm stuck here in this little town, and it's like horrible.
We got a big front porch outside, lots of room. Bring a mask, come over. I'll crack you a beer, and we'll hang out.
Hey, we'll make that happen. I like that. But let me do this. This will be fun. If I were to go over to your fridge and open it up, what's the Eric Oblander beer?
Right now, there's some Founders in there.
Okay.
There's some Founders Brewery beer. There's I got some really weird, kind of like, what did I get? I got a bunch of weird stuff the other day. Some local stuff. I always keep a couple crunchy hippies on hand.
Okay.
Some Ernest. So, but usually, to be honest with you, I have to reload whenever I don't leave many stragglers behind.
That's cool. Yeah.
If we're rolling downhill for a night, there's not a lot left. There's not a lot of leftovers. I have to
So,
go prepare.
full disclosure, man, I don't drink a lot.
More perfect match.
Yeah, I will have a beer with you, right? Just probably one. And I will tell you that San Francisco Bay Area I was never crazy about really hopsy beers. And they were so hopsed out in California that it's almost like drinking, Pine Sol or something.
Yeah.
And I cannot do it anymore. So I'm not into the IPAs with the hopsy taste. My favorite beers are like, stuff that I could do Anchor Steam and stuff, but more, I like Amstel Lights and stuff like that. Like pretty pedestrian.
We got lots of wine over here. We got lots of sodas if you want. We'll hook you.
And I'll tell you what, a red wine would be killer.
Make it happen. Come on over. We'll listen to more records and wear masks and drink through straws.
I like this a lot. Drink through straws. I love it.
I'm in.
Dirty dry martinis. That's my favorite. A dirty dry martini, man. That's my drink right there.
I've got a bottle of Toledo Spirits gin in here, so we can do that.
Oh, it's on, dude. Now it's really on. All right, man. We'll make that happen. Thanks for doing this. It's fun.
Thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this all week since you invited me to do it. I love it. This has been great. Just doing research and watching these again, and it's been cool, man. It's a nice distraction.
Great, dude. Well, I value you. I'm going to hang up, and then I have to get going with my pandemic jobs. I have like bizarre jobs I'm doing during the fun times.
Yeah, my farmer with the guns farmer.
Yeah, today I'm helping my friend Dr. Casara move her office. So I've been moving boxes of books and stuff. It's
nice.
You can't see my bookshelf, but I got so many free books out of it.
Nice deal.
Because she's a big time journalism professor here at the university, so she's always like, okay, now you're gonna need to read this. You have to read this book, and I have these great ones really fast. I know I'm trying to get off the call.
That's cool.
Look at these treats. Look, Dr. Seuss Goes to War. This is Dr. Seuss's artwork from during World War II. Like really interesting. And there's books on like, propaganda artwork and all kinds of historical goodness. I mean, just amazing books.
Now, if I reach back here in my bookshelf, watch this.
Yeah, random.
Ready?
Yeah.
This is what you're gonna like.
Okay, what you got?
I have to do it to the side because the slip cover is gone.
I love it. Yeah,
It's like Mad Magazine for gays, man.
I love it. I've got schlocky stuff over here too, though. I don't know if I can grab one as fast as you did, but I've got it. I got plenty of that stuff.
I've been collecting these Hammond Times. I'm playing organ. I got a lot of these old Hammond Times magazines.
Oh, I got lots of guitar stuff. How about this? This is one of my favorite graphic. This is a compilation. When I was a kid, I had all of the individual comics, but Craven's Last Hunt is one of my favorite comic stories of all time.
Yeah, my kid just got into Craven the Hunter when he was doing this kind of Spider-Man retrospective.
Is that right?
Yeah, he's like, this dude's cool. Yeah.
Dude, I don't know if he's read it. It's a boy, right?
Yeah.
Dude, Craven's Last Hunt is one of the greatest comic series I've ever read. It's nice and short and sweet and perfect. It's amazing.
I'll go find it for him. He'll love it.
But he dies. Craven dies. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
All right, dude. I'm going to hang us up on the record button. And then
cool.
Bye to you. Okay.
Thanks. And don't forget to watch Rise Up on BCAN, everybody, and listen to Five Horse Johnson whenever you can.
Yes. And check out the Fast Piece of Furniture back catalog as well.
Do that too.
All right, I'm hanging this up.